Hi, welcome to Seaside Quilting Tutorials. So for a long time, and a little bit of story goes with this, a long time ago I had these beautiful pictures. Well, actually it was one picture, but it was those split canvases. And I've been in love with those over the years, and there's so many pictures that I would absolutely love to turn into the split canvas idea. And one evening as I was sitting there, I've been doing quilting for several years now. I don't even remember how many. I started out so many years ago cutting with scissors my pieces out. Because that's how you did sewing for clothing back then, of course. So that's the only way that I knew to put pieces together, and I did them by hand. And since then, so much has changed over time. We have rotary cutters, we have AccuQuilt cutters, we have so many different kinds of cutters out there now. So many new machines compared to when I first started out. It's amazing the changes over the years, and I'm amazed all the time at the creativity that's out there in the world. So anyways, I was sitting there one night and I was thinking, oh, it would be so great, because I was really becoming addicted to panels during this time period. And I had them stacked up, but then wondering, well, what more do you do with them than just put borders around them and quilt them? And I was like, there's got to be more. And I thought to myself, I had this beautiful one, and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was some way that you could split it up? And, you know, as many of us do, you have an idea, and you don't always do the follow-through or know how to do the follow-through. So one day I happened upon Donna Jordan, and this was when I first found her, was when she became famous for her pattern, The Secret Window. And ever since, I've been experimenting with panels, myself. Over time I have made several based on her pattern, but altering them in my own ways over time. And she of course has Jordan fabrics, and I've asked many people, and a lot of people hadn't even heard of her, and some have, of course, because we have so many hundreds of people that come through our group and our lives and so forth. And I was amazed at how many didn't hear of her, because she's like one of my quilting heroes out there for quilting patterns. So, and I've learned a lot from watching her. Most of what I've learned from watching tutorials online. And it's amazing, because way back in my time, when I first began, if you didn't know somebody that did a trade, it was hard to learn the trade. And so it's a wonderful age that we live in now, and I don't want to take anything away from her or her pattern or her video. Not trying to teach you the exact sizes that she uses, although we will give you the link to that downloadable pattern that she designed. And like I said, I don't want to take anything away from her. She does an incredible job with her creativity. I consider her to be a great quilt artist. And so anyways, moving forward today, let me adjust my camera, because I want you to see this panel. And many of you have seen this panel in our lives, and you've asked me to do an attic window quilt, which I will be doing upcoming. I have panels ready for that as well. And some other ways to cut up panels we'll be going over in the future. However, Let's start with this, because the way that she designed it is so simple to do. It's very easy to do. So I'm going to start with that, and the way that I've altered it is, first we're going to take this panel and we are going to square it up, and then we will cut off each end the amount that we need to get it to the length that we want. And I want you to be able to think on your own, because that was something that I struggled with. I always had to have an exact pattern or the exact fabric that somebody else used. It was difficult for me to see past what somebody had already designed. And over the years, I've been learning more and more, and so I alter things to my own way. I've even used larger panels. One of them was a disaster, and I will be showing you that at the end of the video, because there was a lot of learning from that experiment, and realizing what my mistakes were in it taught me a lot. So, you know, don't be afraid to experiment. Even if it doesn't turn out perfect, it does turn out to be something because it taught you. And so I've learned not to be afraid to cut my fabric, not to be afraid to do something different. So the first thing that you want to do with these panels, because they can get skewed and shifted, so I double starch them, sometimes even starch them 3 times to stiffen them up as much as I can to make my cutting a lot easier. And I've already pre-done that. And so we're going to, first, we want to make sure that we have the right size. Now this panel, I think, originally is 24 inches wide by the width of fabric. You can use any size panel to do this with. You just have to do a little thinking with it. And we'll explain that as we go. So the first part that we want to do is we want to get it squared up first on each side so that it's one width, okay? So when you look at your panel, decide how wide do you want it to be? How much do you want to come off each side? Now this panel has a little piece over in here that wasn't right on the dotted line, and I think even if it had been, it wouldn't be perfectly square. And I don't know if you'll be able to see in the camera, but I could see it when I was lining it up, that it's not 100% perfect. There are Hoffman videos on how to square up your panels, especially the Dream Big ones. I believe the Dream Big ones, now don't quote me on this, but I think there might be poly in them. I'm not 100% sure, but many of your printed picture panels have some poly in them. I believe this one from Timeless Treasures is all cotton. From the feel of it, from pressing it and whatnot, it feels like it's 100% cotton. But, and don't quote me on the whole Dream Big thing, because I might be wrong and I don't want to say something I shouldn't say, but some printed panels have some polyester in them. They are a little bit more stretchy, so you have to work with them to square them up, especially if you're going to be cutting them up. This one's a lot easier. It does feel like it's 100% cotton to me. So I want to, and I'm going to use these dash lines, these cutting lines on the side to help me a little bit, to get this so that it will be straight. But it veers off a little bit up in here, which, you know, happens. And I'm not going to try to stretch it into place because I'm going to be cutting some off anyways. I do want to make sure that at the bottom that it's not got a ripple in it. If it has a ripple in it, it's not laying straight, okay? So the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that it's laying as straight as you possibly can get it. And then you want to find the center of the panel. So I'm going to fold it over. Now that I had it laying nice and flat and straight, I'm going to fold it over. And I'm wanting to find the center so I know where to set it up. Okay. So I found my center, and I'm going to get that onto, I want this bottom fold to be straight on one of my lines on my cutting mat. And then that center, I'm going to line it up so I know how much I need to cut off. So I have to think for a minute. Okay, so I need to move it down here a little bit. And let me see, sometimes it's hard to see where I folded it. Let me see, if I put it this way, it will help me a little bit more. It can be a goof sometimes. That darn fold keeps just disappearing on me. And there's always some math in quilting. Now I've lost my fold line. All right, so I'm gonna fold it one more time. Not a problem, I'll just fold it one more time, find my center. Try to finger press it a little bit harder this time so I can maybe see it for just a little longer while I'm lining it up. And it is important to find the center so you're taking equal amounts off each side. And make sure I did this a little askewed. I'm going to straighten it out just a little bit more. And line this up. And it does take a couple minutes to line it up. So 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to make this the width that I want, and I'm doing it on a whole number. You'll get the exact measurements that she used. I just gotta think for one moment. Okay. I just had to make sure that of what I'm cutting off of it. So I'm going to cut this, and I'm using whole numbers. So this is, I think, around a 24 or 25 inch, I don't remember, panel. I found my center. I have this bottom fold laying straight on the line so that my cuts will be nice and straight. I've folded it mostly in half. I just need to be able to see my numbers up there and my numbers down here. So I can use this to do my cutting, and I forgot where my number was. You know, just shoot me now. Okay. So I'm gonna cut some off the side here. Lining my ruler up to make sure that it's nice and straight. And I am going to use a weight on my ruler. because when I'm cutting a long distance like this, and I don't have it folded a lot, I put a weight down at the end, and this helps hold my ruler up at the top so it doesn't wiggle back and forth. I want it to stay in place where I need it to be while I'm down here cutting. And you never want to cut back and forth like this. That's just going to cause a ragged side, and it's going to cause more fraying. So if you need to move your hand up, which you will need to do, you just stop with the rotary cutter, edge your fingers up, keeping them, of course, away from the edge. And so you just stop, move your fingers up, stop, and move your fingers up, and do your cut. And hopefully I cut this the right size. Because if I mess this up, we'll be doing a whole new math. Okay, so. Okay, we're hoping I did it right. If not, like I said, we'll be doing a whole new math. And whenever I'm measuring something, I will measure it over and over and over until I am 100% confident with my cut. And if I have to recheck and recount, that's what I do, because I've had mess ups before. I hate them. It's a waste of fabric, it's a waste of my time. So I try to be as accurate as I can right from the start. And we'll find out in a second if I did this right and if I have to redo my math or not. Okay, so we got both sides cut. And that does take out some of your picture. Oh yes, I did it right. Yay for me. Okay. The next thing that you need to do is you need to decide not only how wide do you want it to be, and you can follow the exact measurements in the pattern. You can use the exact size panel that she recommended for her pattern. And you can definitely do the exact measurements. But one thing that you need to do in looking at your picture, this is how much of my picture that I have left. I've lost some on each side. So from the bottom, I decide, do I want to take, how much do I want to take off the top? How much do I want to take off the bottom? Because that's how much is going to be the length of your center. And then each strip is going to get shorter and shorter so that you have like the split canvas. Now some split canvas pictures are all the same size. They're just split. And you can do that with a panel. You can just do your strips and then sew strips between, and I'll be explaining that in just a moment. But basically, and this is wider, sometimes I use a 2.5 inch wide strip between, which will end up being 2 inches finished. But usually I use smaller ones because I've learned a lot over time. So you have to imagine that you're going to have strips. It wouldn't be this wide, of course. It's going to be less wide than this. Let me grab one of my shorter ones, or less wide ones, whatever. So you have to imagine you're going to be having these strips in between. And you could certainly just cut it the full length, several strips, and just have it be like a split canvas picture. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. They are very beautiful. I've done some that way. And actually, I've done some for the center of a quilt that way. Did it split, and I've done some this way for the center of, this one's going to be a wall hanging. However, you, excuse me, could also use this for the center of a quilt, like a twin or a queen, full size, king, queen, whatever. And then build borders around it. You can do other blocks around it and build an entire quilt from this being the center of your quilt. It doesn't have to be a wall hanging. It's all in, you just have to expand your thoughts and think about it. So I'm thinking I want it to be somewhat equal. And let me see. My math is way off today, so I'm just going to try to get this to about, and there's going to be a good amount coming off the top and the bottom. Let me move that weight out of the way someplace where I'm not going to drop it off onto my foot. That would not make me happy. So I'm going to lay it out on my table, and I'm going to try to figure out, from looking at it, how much do I want to let go of the bottom, and how much do I want to let go of at the top. Now I definitely don't want to bring it all the way up and lose the cardinals. There's some beautiful cardinals up here in the trees. Let me hold this up. There's these beautiful cardinals up in the trees, and I want them to be nice up in the trees, and I want a little bit of the top of the trees to be above them. And I want to make sure that I'm not cutting this so much off that I'm up to here. I want a little bit of these branches down at the bottom so that it, you know, you can see that this is sitting in the snow, this light here. So I'm just going to adjust it, and I'm going to line it up on a line, and I'm going to slide it up until the bottom is at the size that I want, and taking a look at the top and seeing how much would I lose from each end. And this looks about right to me. Let me see. I'd like to keep just a little more of that top. And then I'm just going to line this side up because I know now that this side is a nice straight edge. So I'm going to line that up. I'm taking a second gander at it. There's no 100% perfect thing. It's all in where you want it to be. And so now I'm going to cut this bottom part off. And I actually save these pieces that I cut off panels, because if you cut this up into smaller pieces to work inside of a block or even a practice block, I think this would be really pretty in a block. So let me just take a gander, grab my weight, set that up there. That is a pretty piece, and I won't throw that away. I will keep that in my scraps. It could definitely be used for something. So I never let go of anything that I know I could use for something else. You never know. I always come up with little things to use those types of scraps for. Double checking. Okay. I'm always double checking. I double check, triple check, quadruple check. And then I still sometimes will make a mistake. So it depends on how much of a hurry I'm in and what's going on in life, and you know, all those little things. Okay. So now I'm going to make my final cut to make this the size that I want of width and length. Okay, and here we go. We're not cutting any little birdies. No birdies have been injured in this project. Okay, hope you got that joke. All right, so now once again, we will need to know where the center is again, because I'm sure I've lost it. Yeah, I cannot see it. So I'm going to fold this in half. Make sure that it's lined up nice and straight, because now I know that it is squared up. It's all even going here, it's all even going here, and I'm just going to finger press this fold. And this is just because it's not going to fit all the way across my cutting mat. So I've got to fold it, and I make sure that my raw edges line up on the sides, and I make sure that my raw edges line up on the top. And I'm just finger pressing this bottom so I can line it up on a line. And once again, I'm going to find the center of this panel. So I'm folding it over the other direction, making sure that everything is lined up. This is always the fun part, is when you fold things, they roll over. So you want to make sure that it's laying nice and flat and all your parts are lined up. And I'm going to finger press, so I'll hopefully be able to see that center line once I've folded it. And then open it back up, and I can see my fold. Get this back where I need it. It's just wanting to mess with me today. Always when I'm on camera. Let me see if I can see that fold down at the, yep. And I need to hurry up and get that on the line. I'm telling you, it's one of those days. Not everything is wanting to be easy for me today. And I'm just visually checking to make sure that everything looks like it's lined up. And of course, it's a little skewed on me. Don't ask me why. I did all my straight cuts. On that line. This is straight on the line. Okay. So you decide how wide, like I said, you know, and I don't want to over repeat it, but you can follow her instructions explicitly if you want. I'm deciding how wide I want my middle section to be, and then I'm going to, I gotta figure out half from there. Half of my measurement. Okay. I'm just moving it just a little bit over for me. And this will be my middle section. And your middle section stays the longest piece. And we will add some to the top and to the bottom. And then as we cut them down, well, we'll go over that when we get there. Let's do these cuts first. And like I said, you can, the first time that you do it, I would follow her pattern, her cuts. And then from there, you'll see how everything goes together. And then from there, you'll see how you can experiment. Let me just recount. Okay. I don't want to make a cut after I've talked without rechecking, because that's when I make my mistakes. And I feel like a piece of that did not cut. No, it didn't. So this is my centerpiece. And I'm going to lay this right here. Just like that. So that I remember what my center is. I do not want to forget what my center is. And then I'm going to do, I decide how wide do I want my next piece to be. It would help if I looked at my ruler the right way, I'll tell you what. And so I will make my next strip. And I think this one has 7 strips. So I'm making sure that I put them back in the order on my table that I cut them, so my picture doesn't get messed up. And then I'm gonna cut my next piece. And I will show you in just a moment what this looks like after it's all cut up. So these are my next 2 pieces, and I'm going to put them in the order, lay them out in the order. Now I have what they call ABC pins. They have numbers on one side, letters on the other side, and I quite often use those when I need to mark pieces in the order that they go in. And then I'm going to cut the same measurements on this side. And I'll show it to you in just a moment. It will make a lot more sense when you see them all cut up. Okay, so this goes this way. And then my last cut. Okay, so let's take a look at it all cut up. Let me get that weight out of my way so I don't mess myself up. So I'm just going to pull these around so I remember the order. And at any time if you forget the order, you can just put them up against each other and make sure that it's making your picture. So I'm going to leave them split apart just a little bit so that you can see that my picture is lined up nicely. And this is my centerpiece. Oh, we did cut that bird. Sorry, birdie. He did get cut. It's okay, we'll put them back together in a minute. I did this, we had a panel not too long ago that was a winter scene, and it had a brook coming up through the trees, and it looked like a nice little ice skating brook. and whatnot. That would have been a beautiful one to do this with. There's a lot of scenic ones that are just gorgeous. We've had some ocean scenic ones that would be beautiful to do this with. The Dream Big, I have done and cut those down. I've even done some small ones, like where you have like those 12 or 16 inch squares and you have several of them on a panel. I've taken those apart when I want to make someone a small gift that I know they don't have much room to hang on anything on their walls, and just wanted to give them something like a cheer-up gift or a small birthday gift. And I've done the same thing with small pictures in a panel. It's a wonderful thing to do. It's so much fun, and you can learn so much from doing a smaller version, and not feel like you're wasting a lot, because a lot of those smaller panels with the squares on them may have like 6 squares on them or whatever, you know, like 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, and you can take those apart and do the same thing with those. So right now all these are the same exact length, okay? And you could take your strips and sew them between each one, and you would have a version of the split canvas. You see what I mean? I know I got you a little ways away. Let me see if I can scoot you up without shaking that camera too much. I don't want to spin you around, make you dizzy. So these strips are going to go between these cuts, which will give it that effect of being a split canvas. Now I couldn't find in my stash a blue that was really matching up well with this, and there is a lot of black and gray in here, and a lot of your frames on pictures are black or brown or whatever. It would have been nice if I would have had a fabric that coordinated. I went through my fabrics and I just wasn't finding something that blended in as well as what Donna Jordan did with hers. However, I do like the black. I've done it before and I really enjoy it. So when you have these splits, we're going to make cuts. Now the center one is already the size, the length and width that I want it to be. So it's going to get left alone, and I'm just going to fold it in half, and I'm going to lay it so it's in the center. Now each of these two are the first ones that I'm going to be cutting. And so I'm going to set these over here so they stay in the order that I want them to be. Try not to lose track of where I am. Now, however much, and I am going to add just a little bit of the border fabric of the black to the bottom and the top of the center, okay? And remember, when you sew something to the bottom and something to the top, you are going to lose a 1/2 inch on each end because of your 1/4 inch seam. So you have to add that in. So whatever I subtract, I need to add back, so it equals the length that I make my center. So if I add 3.5 inches to each end of this and make this 39 inches long, and I cut some off these that go next to it, I have to make my pieces long enough so that when I add them, they will equal the 39 inches of that center. And that's how we will keep everything lined up. And we are going to cut more. So the first two I'm cutting a couple of inches off of. The next one I'm cutting even more off of. And then the last one I'm cutting even more off of. And I'm going to do them individually because I don't, you know, you could lay them side by side. I just don't trust myself. So especially if I was doing it by myself, I would just line these up to each other and cut them. But since I'm on video and I'm talking, I like to be able to double check everything and not make a boo-boo. And I almost made a boo-boo. Okay. And that's because I'm talking while I'm doing it. So I almost cut too much off of these. So I'm cutting a piece off the one end, and I have to cut the same amount off the other end. Hopefully I did that right. Let me see. Yep. Woo-hoo. It's gonna be one of those days. And I may seem like I'm over measuring and overly being careful, but that's because I'm on video and I don't want to mess it up. So I want to make sure that I put this the right way. This is his head, so I know it goes on this side. Oops. And I'm cutting the same amount off the other side. And I'll be showing you what they look like now that they're cut after I get these cut. And you'll have all your measurements in the pattern. And we will give you the link to her pattern. It's not my pattern. So we will be giving you the link to her pattern. She's got a lot of beautiful patterns. And I've made quite a lot of them. Not all, definitely. She makes a lot. Okay, so the next ones that go next to those, and I'll show you in a moment what they look like after I've cut them up. And you can vary your sizes. They don't have to be exactly the way that I've done it or exactly the way that she's done it. You just have to do your math. And some of us don't like to do math, and some of us do. Aw, poor little birdie. Poor little birdie. He got cut off. We're going to save the little birdie because he's just so perfect. Look. See how perfect he is in that little... Aw. We're going to save him because he's like... It's almost like I purposely lined him up, even though I didn't. So we're going to save little birdie aside for another little project. Okay, so I cut that end. Now I'm going to cut this end. Yes. This is a head trip when you're doing it online. It is definitely a head trip when you're doing it online. Okay, so this piece goes on that side. Let me get my next one that I'm cutting that amount off of. Hopefully we don't lose this birdie. Oh no, this birdie gets to stay. Yay! This cardinal gets to stay. You know, it's always good to double check, triple check, whatever you gotta do, because once you make your cuts, you can't glue your fabric back together. It doesn't work. It does not work. So if you goof it up, you gotta start over. Okay, so this one goes on that side. And these strips, we lose even more. And we're almost done with our cutting, so I can show you what these look like after they're all cut up. And some of those pieces just aren't going to be good for much. But I might hold on to them for just a little bit to see if in some of my other things that I use scraps on, if they might be useful. I don't know. Oh, this one's a tiny one. And where do you go? I think you go over here. I think. We'll check after. I'm pretty sure that's where, yeah, because I can see the side of the Christmas tree on this one. And that's one of the whole key things of doing these cut up panels is that you want to keep your pieces in the order. And when we do it, the attic window one, that'll be very important to keep them all in order. So those ABC pins really come in. I gotta check that last piece, make sure it was 6 inches. Yeah. Okay. All right, just about done. So that's all my little pieces cut. Oops, little pieces. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got now. And I'll show you. Now, if you're ever unsure about your pieces, if you got them on the right side, you can line them up. So right here, I am gonna spin this camera just a little bit because I want to get, well, actually, I'll just slide this down more. Will that help? I think it will help. So if you're not sure, like if you separate these somehow, you know, the cat gets up here and kicks them on the floor, in my life, that would happen. You can just take a look at the picture and you can see, yes, this goes on this side, okay? And I can see as I'm putting them up to each other that I have them on the right sides. And of course the center is the most obvious because that's your widest piece. And if you get little ravels on the sides, don't pull those. Let them be for now until you sew. Don't try to pull one because that will, that'll mess your piece up. It won't be pretty. And so this is how they're all gonna line up. And I can see that all my pieces are on the right sides. And I can double check it by the picture, okay? Let me scoot this away a little bit. Oops, sorry about the bouncing, but I want you to see this. And so you can see now the center is the longest piece, and then they get shorter and shorter and shorter. And it's equal on the ends, okay? And you, like I said, you'll have her exact measurements on cutting and everything, but this is basically how she designed it to go. And then your little strips are going to go in between each of these. So if I laid a little strip here, of course you're going to lose 1/4 inch on each side of this, so they're going to be even shorter. They're going to go more, it'll look kind of like this when it goes together. It's going to have a little thin strip, and you'll be able to see your picture come together, okay? Or come back together, which is really super neat. But before we sew those strips, we need to replace what we cut. And to do that, I have these extra pieces cut. So we have, is that the right one? No, they're not the right one. I should mark these too so I remember where they go. And I think I cut too many. I did. Of the center one. I didn't need 4. I needed 4 of the other ones. I only needed 2 of the center ones. So that will go in my scrap pile. And then, so those go on each end. And when these are sewn together, I'm going to lose a 1/2 inch here, and I'm going to lose a 1/2 inch down here. And it will end up being my 39 inches long total. So, knowing my math for the center, I needed to cut my ends so that these will all end up lining up. And these are going to get sewn on first. And then my next pieces, which are these, will go here. Whoops. And I just want you to visually see how these are all going to line up to each other. And then, let me see, these on here. So you'll understand a little bit about what I'm talking about. Because whatever I cut off, I have to replace so that this stays in line for a picture. And then my last pieces will go here, and these are the longest pieces. And once I sew these on each of the ends, then I will do my strips in between. Okay, so let me see if I can. So see how down at the bottom that will be all straight across and even on the bottom, but see how, if I can get my camera to stay where I want it, but each one of these is a little bit shorter than the center. So a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter from each other. So it just kind of doubles down. But once we add these pieces back, it will all end up being one length at the bottom and the same up at the top. So we're going to take this over and to the sewing machine, and I'm going to, let me grab my ABC pins. Or actually, I think I'll just mark it with a water-soluble pen on the back and do like, you know, a 1, a 2, and so forth across. And then I'll remember what order they go in. And you can always put them up against each other. I know that the tail end of the bird isn't going to be over on this side. I know that the light over here isn't going to be on that side. 1, 2, 5. But it doesn't hurt to use a water-soluble pen and mark the back, the order of them. And it's going to be apparent, my extra pieces that I cut. And like I said, all this, these extra pieces that you're cutting from your background, all the sizes for these are there. All the sizes for these are in the pattern. So we're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and we will take our extra pieces, and I'm just going to lay these on top of the ones that I'm going to be sewing them onto. Like this. So I keep everything together with what it needs to go together with. and I will meet you over at the sewing machine, and I will bring these over. We will sew the ends on, we will press them, and then we will get to the point where we add our strips in the middle and our borders on the sides. All right, so in just a moment, we'll be back and we'll go over there. Okay, so here we are back over at my sewing machine, and I'm so fortunate now to have a sewing table for my sewing machine, so I have extra room in the back of my table that I can line these all up in the order that they go in. If for any reason my cat had come along, I just had gone upstairs to set up some coffee to percolate for me, and I never know when I come back if my cat will have come here and messed everything up, and had she done that, I did number everything so I know what order it goes in. If you don't have a space like this, and I know many of you don't, I didn't for many, many years. I just feel very, very fortunate, and I have great gratitude now that I have a table like this that I can do this on. You could always take your cutting mat and lay these out and bring it over and set it on a table nearby you or on the floor next to you. Whatever it takes to keep them in order so that you can sew them together. I've set my machine at a scant 1/4 of an inch. I always use a scant 1/4 of an inch when I am quilting. It's become a habit. Until it became a habit, I used to put a sticker on my machine, just a sticky note that reminded me to set my machine for a scant 1/4 of an inch, and I always use 2.0 length of stitches, so my machine is all set up and ready to sew. So I'm going to grab my first piece, and I start from one side and work my way across. Now, when I'm alone and I'm doing this all by myself, I would go through and I would sew all the tops. I would chain stitch and do all the tops. I would press them, and then I would come back and chain stitch all the bottoms. But I don't want there to be any confusion while we're working on this. Now, excuse me, I'm gonna adjust my camera so that you can, whoops, sorry about that shakiness. And my hand in the way, see my hand? But I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Excuse me. So I have my first piece, and I took all the pieces, all the extra pieces that are getting sewn onto each end, and laid them on top of each one, as you saw at the table. They're still there, so I can just grab them and do my sewing. And you do want to make sure that you're doing straight stitches, because especially when we go to do the long pieces, so that everything stays nice and lined up. So make sure that you line up your raw edges to each other. And you're going to sew your scant 1/4 of an inch. And I'm not going to clip these or pin these on. I'm just going to sew them because it's pretty easy. Now, I might do that when I go to do the long pieces to make sure that they stay lined up. Going to take this lead. I'm not going to use my leaders and enders tonight, just so we can go through this a little faster. So once I have this, we're going to be pressing our seams toward the dark, whatever is the darker fabric, whether it be your background fabric or your panel. You'll press it to whatever your dark is, and of course my background is my darkest, so I'm pressing it. And I'm just going to finger press these for now. I will do a nice pressing once I get these sewn together, but for now, and it's going to work just fine. And if you don't use your fingernails, they do have those, which I don't have one handy, amazingly enough, probably because I don't end up using them. But I do have my purple thing, Many of you have seen the purple thing. It has all kinds of little uses for it. Some have those, wooden sticks or whatever you use. Some have those rollers, and you can just finger press that, and it's going to stay in place nicely while we get through what we need to do. So now I'm going to sew the other end on. Doing the same thing, like making sure that it's lined up nicely, and we'll sew that piece on. I'm like Speedy Gonzalez with the pedal. So I usually have to turn my machine down when I'm quilting, because otherwise I hit that pedal and it just zoom, takes right off on me. And once again, I'm going to finger press that, going toward the dark side. And then I'm just going to sort of fold this in half. I'm not going to like fold it, but just so it's in half. And I'm just going to set it up there, back in the order. And it's not going to do it nicely because I'm too far away, of course. Okay, we'll just set that up there. And then we'll take our next piece, and we're going to do the same exact thing. And we're going to do this with every single one of them, attaching those pieces onto the ends. Now, like I said, once you've made one of these or a couple of these, you get so used to it that eventually you can see how you can adjust it for wider panels. They're not going to be longer because, the width of the fabric is the width of the fabric, and it's pretty standard throughout quilt companies. But, the length rather is, anyways, you know what I mean. But, this one I think was 24 or 25 inches wide, and we cut it down. There are some that are 30 inches, 32 inches, some are a full yard across, 36 inches. They're made different widths. And so you would have to figure out how wide do you want your center. That's usually your widest piece, and then your next widest is the ones on each side of that, and so forth as you go along. You don't even have to have as many cuts in a panel as I did. I have 7 pieces. You could have done it with 5 pieces. You could have done it with 3 pieces. I don't think 3 pieces works quite as nicely, for my personal opinion. But you could have done it in 5 pieces very easily. And you just have to adjust your math. And you have to remember that as you're adding these, you would lose a 1/2 inch at the top and a 1/2 inch at the bottom. So you have to add that in to, your extra pieces, so that they'll all end up the same length as your center. You'll understand that more as you make your own, and then you can play with them and adjust other panels. She gives you the basic one for the, I think 24 or 25 is like about the narrowest panel that's made, from what I can remember. I don't think they get any narrower than that. Maybe they do. I don't recall any right offhand. Of course, I haven't seen every single panel that's out there in the world, but yeah. But you'll see once you've made one how they go together, how the whole process works. And then it's just a little bit of math. And it's like that with anything when you're creating your own borders to go around a panel or a centerpiece. I don't always use the panel. Sometimes I just use a really neat piece of fabric that has pictures on it that I like big, huge print florals. I will use those for a centerpiece and then build around it with borders and blocks, because I have a hard time cutting those up. Not that I can't cut them up, it's just I don't always like cutting up flowers. I like to see the big flowers. But everybody's different. I've seen some people take some fabric that I was like, I don't know how you would cut that up and put that into a block and have it look like something, and had someone else do it and go, oh yeah, that looks beautiful. So, you know, everybody has a different way of seeing things or liking things. Okay, so that's our next piece done. And you're going to continue to do this with each one of them, and then put them back in the order. Take your next one, sew your top, sew your bottom, continue to do that all the way across, and then we're going to come back and we'll do our strips going down the sides. Okay, so we have all of our tops and bottoms sewn on. I have them spread out again to the back of my machine, all in the order that they need to go in. So our next step is grab one of your pieces, and we're going to take our strips, our side strips, and we're going to begin to sew these on. Now you make sure that you have the first strip going in the right direction, the top up here, your bottom down here, and we're going to sew these on. Now you can clip them or you can just sew them on. I am going to put just a couple of clips so I make sure I'm not twisting this and getting it on. It's up to you what you want to do. I'm not going to put a lot of clips, but I will put a few going through. It just works easier for me to have it lined up. I watch other people do these videos and they just zoom along. They don't bother to clip or pin, and I've had problems with that before, with everything lining up at the end, so I don't like to do it. With these long strips, sometimes I've gotten to the end and one's shorter than the other, or longer than the other than it's supposed to be, and so forth. Okay, good enough. So now we're going to sew these strips onto the sides, and you want it on the inner side. Let me make sure I did this. Now that I said that, I'm just going to double check that I got it on the right side. I did, okay, because I really hate seam ripping. It's not like I don't sometimes have to do it. No matter how much you sew, you end up having to do it. And it's just going to take me a couple minutes. The other part's quick. This part was not as quick. It does take a couple minutes to sew down through the length of it. And you do want to make sure that you're staying nice and straight with your sewing. especially on these long strips, because it will show up if you don't. Oops. And after I said that, it went a little crooked on me. Yeah, it did. It did. Darn, darn, darn. Okay, I have a seam ripper here somewhere. Mind you. It ends up getting moved back and forth. Sometimes I have to seam rip things that I long arm, unfortunately. That's no fun. I just need to go back a few stitches. It went and slipped on me right at the very end. When I got to the end of the machine, it slipped on me, and that's not good. Sometimes those feed dogs grab a hold and take off on me. Okay, so now I started sewing at the bottom of it, and I'm just going to finger press this over to make it a little bit easier, because these are very narrow pieces. Now you could use a little bit wider, and I'll show you in a minute, not in a minute, but when we get done with this, I will show you one that I experimented with, a Dream Big panel, and I made my pieces between too wide. I was at work one day, went back when I worked for Husqvarna Viking, and if we didn't have customers and we had all of our work done, we could work on projects. And without thinking, I made my pieces between really wide, and it really elongated the width, and did not make it look as nice. I don't know what I was thinking that day. It was many years ago when I was first starting to do these, and like I said, I was experimenting. I have a ton of panels. I always buy several of the Dream Bigs when I buy them, and it did not turn out the way that I wanted it to turn out, let me tell you. People have seen it and they've loved it, but I ended up using it for a throw on the back of my couch for a long time, because it went the whole length of my couch, because I made it too wide. And now it's become a bed runner, and it looks really cute on the bottom of the bed, but not as cute as I would like it to be. So then I'm going to take my next piece, and making sure that I have it going in the right direction. Here's my top up here. Here's my top of the next piece. And so I'm going to, now I started at the bottom sewing. This time I'm going to start at the top sewing. And you want to switch back and forth, because if you don't, it can get kind of like crinkly and funky. So it's whenever you're sewing strips together or whatever, you want to go in one direction, then in the opposite direction, and keep doing that as you're adding things. Otherwise you end up with puckers, you end up with ripples. It's never pretty. Okay, so I'm going to clip this a little bit like I did before. to keep everything lined up. And you don't have as much to sew with now because these are very, very narrow. Sometimes I've used 2.5 inches between. Sometimes I cut them at 2 inches, sometimes 1 3/4 inches. It just depends on how much I want between. With this one, I'm following her pattern, and which, like I said, we will make sure that you have the link to her pattern because it's not mine, and I don't want to take away from what she did. And I also feel that if you have the pattern, that you'll learn better from having the pattern in the beginning when you first make one, and then from there experiment. Okay. And so now I'm going to sew the next side, and I'm starting at the top. And just keep your raw edges together. I'm often sitting sideways to my machine during these tutorials so that you can see what I'm doing, or hopefully you're seeing what I'm doing. I've had a couple of times where I forgot to maneuver my camera over to where you could see it, and that's frustrating. I did that with one of them, and luckily I previewed it before I posted it, and I had to redo the entire video because I forgot to move my camera over. One of the woes of doing tutorials. Okay, we're almost done with this strip. Now when we are finger pressing these, and we will do a full press once it's all put together, you want to be, your seams are going to go towards that sashing piece that's going down through, okay? Not the other direction. So I'm going to finger press this one, then I'll show you what I mean. Both sides are going to go toward, they're going to finger press toward that sashing piece. And like I said, for right now, I'm just finger pressing, which works fine for right now. And then I'll do my overall pressing after I get all these pieces put together. And this is a very thin sashing piece because it was cut not very wide. Get this finger pressed. Just takes a couple minutes. And then I'll show you the other side so that you can see. So as you finger press your seams, they're both going toward that sashing, so it looks just like this. And when you look at the back of the quilt after this is all pressed, it will look like the panel was never cut. And that's the nice thing about using the thinner sashing between, is that as this is folded over, you can make, you know, it's almost a way of double checking that everything went together as nicely as you wanted. And so the back side, it will look like your panel was never cut, except for, you know, the different lengths of it, of course. So we have our second piece on, and we're going to continue. I'm just gonna press this a little bit more as I go down to smooth everything out, have it nice and smooth. And then I'm going to take my next one, well, I'm going to take my next sashing piece, and it's going to sew onto this side, and I'm going to continue to do this all the way across until I have all my sashing pieces. So there are 6 sashing pieces, but there are 7 pieces of the panel. And so I'm going to sew this on, and this time I'm going to start at the bottom again and sew my way up, then start at the top, come all the way down, and keep switching as I go, and it will keep it nice and flat and neat as we're going. So go ahead and finish all that, and then we will come back. We will put our borders on each side, which will so after we get these sashing pieces in, we're going to sew our borders on each side, and that's going to complete the frame, the background around the whole entire thing. Now you won't need to do a border on the bottom or the top because we already have our background on tops and bottoms of each piece. So we don't want to leave our ends looking like this, like unfinished. So we will do a border on the left and the right side after we get these sashing pieces in. Now, once you have all your sashing strips sewn in between each of the strips, and you've sewn your border on the left side and the right side, you want to take it and you want to smooth it all out, making sure that you can feel that all your seams are going in the right direction. Double check looking at the back. And as you can see from the back, let me see, I got this seam going in the wrong direction. I'm going to have to fix this one when I press it. But that's the reason why you double check in the back. And as you can see from the back, all your panel is back together except for, of course, the ends that you've cut off. But you can see your picture like as if it was never cut. And then you flip it back around, and look how beautiful that is. And I'm in love with this now, and I will have to get another one of these because this is going to be shipped back out to Barb so that she can show it time and time again with different panels, so that you can find other panels to turn into this. I think this would be a beautiful present to give to somebody for a wall hanging. And then when you do your binding, you can add tabs up to the top for hanging it, or you can put a rod thingy at the back. And my last thing will be to go through and check all my seams to make sure that they're all going in the right direction. This one's not, so I'll fix this when I press it to make sure that all my seams are laying down in the direction that I want them to go in. And I want them all to go toward that sashing. And this one, I miscalculated and I didn't get it right, so I'll fix that when I press it. But isn't that just gorgeous? And it's stunning on any wall, and even stunning for the center of a quilt. So you could put more borders around this. You could put more blocks around this, some maybe Christmassy fabric, some snowflakes or something like that. But in itself alone, just the way that it is, I just feel that it's a stunning piece for anyone to cherish over the holidays, and either to keep for yourself. This, like I said, this one's going out to Barb. I'm almost sad to let this one go, but I'm glad that she'll be getting it. and I can make another one quite easily. These don't take very long to do. You can easily do this in a day, and it doesn't take a full day at all. Maybe a couple hours. Once you have all your stuff cut out, it doesn't take very long to put this all together. Once again, we will give you the link to the pattern. It's not our pattern. Sometimes I have created patterns for you and made them downloadable, but we will make sure that you have the link to the pattern. And I've done my best to show you, her creation in this pattern with a different panel than what she used when she did hers. And it's just gorgeous. Now, when you go to quilt this, if you're not a quilter, that's fine. The way that you have the thin sashing, you can easily do stitch in the ditch, and this will hold it together perfectly fine for a wall hanging. Even in this section with good batting, with quality batting, you won't have a problem just doing stitch in the ditch. I really would hesitate to quilt on this, especially where I used black as a backing. Had I had a blue that I felt, or a gray, and I probably did have a gray, I hadn't even thought about it. I could have grabbed a gray and it would have blended in more, and then I could have done an overall quilting. But I just love the picture. I don't feel that there's any reason to take away from this quilt by quilting over it. So I'm just going to do stitch in the ditch all the way down each seam, and it will be gorgeous. And I'll put some little hangers up here for it to hang on. And I think that's just great. So before I go, and I do need to fix that seam, so I will do that afterward. Barb's gonna just love this when she gets it. So this was an experiment. Now, don't judge. Like I said, I was at work, and I was like, I'm going to experiment with a little bit of this, and I did not have the pattern with me, and I did not cut the centerpiece down as much as I should have. I should have cut more off the bottom. I was thinking, well, I don't want to lose a lot of the flower because I love quilting the Dream Big panels. And so I never did cut down the center. I was trying to remember the pattern when I was at work. I used wider sashing. I would never use this wide of a sashing again. I think I used like a 3 or 3.5 inch sashing. I'd have to measure it. It did not come out in the same form, and because it was a larger panel, it extended it too much. It made it too wide for a wall hanging. So it has been really nice for years on the back of my couch. Now it's a bed runner up in one of the spare bedrooms. It's quite old. I did this probably 5-6 years ago. I did this as an experiment, and it did not come out as pleasing as I would have liked. So if I was to do a Dream Big panel again, which I will do at some point, I will use thinner sashing, and I will cut the center down more. I'm going to lose a little bit more of the flower, but I think it will come out looking a lot more stunning, and maybe will end up being a wall hanging. But usually I don't use as wide. The Dream Big panels are 43 inches by 43 inches, and I think they're just a little bit too big for this project. So once again, I would stick with something that is probably 36 inches or under. I really do like better how the 24 to 25 inch ones come out. It's more picturesque, but you definitely could go up to 30, 36 inches, somewhere in there, and still come out with a pretty stunning wall hanging. I'm not sure, and I probably will end up experimenting with it just because I want to see how the Dream Big floral would come out. And you could cut more of the flower out on each side and bring the width of it down, so that you could make it a little more picturesque. Anyhow, I just wanted you to see that. It was a mistake, but at the same time, so many people have liked it, and I can't just throw something like that away, so I do utilize it, and I do on the end of the bed. So that's it for this time. So keep watching for more blocks to be coming out for our Seaside block challenge, using up our scraps, working on our accuracy in blocks. We have many, many, many tutorials coming up. Small gift ideas, sewing room ideas, kitchen ideas, all kinds of stuff coming up. Too much for me to list off. So anyways, that's it for this time. So until next time, I wish you happy sewing.